Welcome back. Ethics, Section 7C. We talked about in the last session, we left off with talking about normative theory and how this theory is used most often in nursing. Let's look and see why it is used in nursing. Remember, we said normative was what we ought to do, not what we think we should do, but what we ought to do, what is right and what is wrong. Well, this normative theory is broken into three parts. There's normative theory 1, which is axiology. That is, it explains the theories of values. And then normative theory 2, which counts as virtue, what is right. And 3, what are the principles of the right conduct. And these concepts are very important, and we use them every day unknowingly or I think unconsciously. They are part of us as we care for our patients. There are other ethical theories. One is called the utilitarianism. That is, it states the greatest good for most people, assumes that an action is right if it leads to the greatest balance of good consequences or to the fewest possible bad consequences. And I wonder about the United States of America when I listen to the debt ceiling debate, whether or not we're utilitarianism, because there's going to be the bad consequences seem to me they're beginning to explode. And then deontology. The decision is right if it conforms to an overriding moral duty and wrong if it violates that moral duty. So you have to think about deontology and to see whether or not where you stand on some of these issues. So according to in 2004, printed in 2008 in DeChauncey, Husted stated that nurses have an ethical experience when caring for vulnerable populations. So that is, when nurses care for patients, there's a power of reason that comes about because they want to initiate actions in opposition to the loss of their well-being. They want to have good actions. So they think about that, they're aware of their ethical feelings, and they want to establish a good healthcare system for patients. They want to make sure that patients have a good health care, but sometimes patients do suffer based on some of the things that we do or some of the things that we have no control over. Sometimes there's experience a vast multitude of disabilities because of patients in our care. Sometimes there's a pursuit of individual values that are difficult, thus making patients very vulnerable. Patients suffer, don't they? Sometimes there's a loss of agency. Sometimes it's very difficult to go to fight for them because we have to think about keeping our own job. So the power to act on his purposes sometimes gets lost. However, it can instill an indifference and places patients in a subsidiary or an irrelevant ethical status. And they may suffer as nurse misdirected and self-righteous intentions are there. There might be ethics of professional practice. Must be appropriate to self-determination of your patients, regardless of what your thoughts are, and it must reduce or eliminate patients' vulnerability. We have to differentiate between populations. Vulnerable patients require attention to their own specific characteristics and a right to different motivations. So you have to think about the bioethical standards that we spoke about earlier. There's got to be freedom. They have the power to take long-term actions. There's got to be that free. They have to have a freedom to think about their situation. You have to be objective, have the ability to know something and then to interact. We have to have self-assertion, therefore an agent of self-ownership. There has to be beneficence. We have to do good, and that we have to be competent in our acting. And then fidelity. We have nurses. We have a commitment to our professional role, and our professional role is taking care of our patients. So ethics is a primary factor in the role of a nurse at all times. And the higher up the ladder you go, the more ethical it is expected you to become.